In fact, a very quick and brief description of today's resource person. He was Suresh Menon. He was born in Madurai, January 1959. He was a student of Kendriya Vidyalaya throughout his schooling years in different cities of India. He is a graduate and postgraduate in commerce from Nagpur University. As a foreign service officer, he had served the Ministry of External Affairs in New Delhi. He had diplomatic assignments at Cambodia, Doha in Qatar, Ukraine, Chicago in USA, Jaffna in Sri Lanka, and last assignment was as High Commissioner of India to Malawi in Africa. He has served about 22 years abroad and 8 years at headquarters in Delhi. He was also a regional passport officer in Pune for last 2 years. On behalf of Ahalya School of Management, I welcome you to this webinar. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ashokan, for that very kind introduction. I do not know whether Dr. Sri Mahadevan Pillai is also one of our listeners today. I hope, because last time when I attended the Zoom session, I did happen to see Dr. Mahadevan Pillai there. If he is there, let me also take this opportunity to recognize Dr. Mahadevan Pillai. Though I have not met him, I have had the opportunity to actually listen to some of his very eloquent talks which he has posted in his Facebook page. So I look forward to meet you, sir, when sometime soon, maybe at Ahalya premises itself. Friends, a very good evening and namaskaram to all MBA students. And just now Ms. Bindu said, this is a much more heterogeneous audience. So welcome to this small session on exploring new opportunities and Africa as a continent, which I thought let me share with all of you during these COVID times. You know, in fact, the entire discourse in the all kinds of media, whether it is the print, the visual, the social, all of them are only talking about COVID. So I thought, you know, let me just digress from this COVID topic and move over to some other new areas, which I think you all will find of some interest. So again, without wasting much of our time, let me just begin by saying that Africa is a continent that is the engine for the growth in the coming years. There's no doubt about that. The coming decades, as things saturate in almost all other parts of the world, it is Africa that is going to be the engine of growth, which every country will look forward to. In fact, every country is already eyeing for a pie in that continent, and many of them have made great amount of effort to enter that continent. So in the next, I think about 30-40 minutes that I have, let me try to cover Africa in as much details as possible. So let me begin by saying that it's always a pleasure to speak to the student community who are now witnessing some of the most challenging times they have ever seen in the 21st century. You students are all in the midst of one of the most important phases of your life also, when you are taking steps to start a new career. So you all must have set up plans and dreams which you will be trying to achieve in the next 20 to 25 or 30 years. But then suddenly appears this COVID from nowhere, I think upsetting many of the plans you all might have already set up. In fact, at least those MBA students who are in the final year, they must be now, had been expecting some campus placements and so on. But I think those things are going to get delayed for some time. But however, I believe that there is not much to worry. You may definitely have to make some major changes and adjustments to your plans, but new opportunities are definitely opening up. And after some small setbacks, you are all going to see a much different and a much reformed, rather a new world, I would say, rather a new world order should be the thing that you need to look out for in the coming years. When I say new opportunities, what I mean is that very recently, I think about a week ago, our finance minister had made some announcements what is called a stimulus package. And I'm not going to the stimulus package, but just one point which I want to touch upon is the real great shift in policy in respect of agriculture. Agriculture, I think, is a very important element of the Indian economy. And there was some much needed reforms in the agricultural sector. And the Honorable Finance Minister has declared the Government of India policy in really reforming the agriculture sector. And I'm sure that was a call that was to have been made, I think, several years or rather a decade ago. But nevertheless, it has been made. And the way the agricultural sector has been opened up, especially the agricultural produce marketing of APMC. I don't know, we need to spend some time on that maybe on some other occasion. But APMC was a big strangle in the development of agriculture in India. And that has been almost literally done away with. And I see huge amount of opportunities for all students who are going to look for job opportunities or become entrepreneurs in the coming years. This agriculture sector is really going to throw up a huge amount of challenges, but also opportunities for our young and new students who are going to clear up their academic session and enter into the professional field. In fact, I may be wrong, or maybe I'm going against the normal line of thinking. I consider this COVID has come as a blessing in disguise. In fact, we should actually see it in that way, because there are certain things that had to be done in the system which was not taking place. And somehow this kind of intervention or a divine intervention, you could say, has come, and everybody has started thinking on the different ways that we need to handle our things. And this is definitely a kind of a blessing in disguise. And several changes that you are going to see in the coming decades, I'm sure, will be because of this COVID that we all have faced. And many policies will be coming up I'm sure, in the coming years, or rather months, which will set the course for the next, I think, a decade or two. This is a kind of a course correction, in everybody's life, in every corporate's life, in every in institutions and organizations' life, there is a need for course correction. I think COVID is one such factor that has come out of the blue, but there is going to be a course correction in many of our issues that we have been handling so far. And I think it's a welcome course correction. There may be some, I'm sure many people are passing through very tough times, especially the migrant workers and so on. But this is all, I think, for the better. Good policies will come out, and India has, had more worse times than this. And as students, of university, I'm sure you are all aware of the 19th century, exactly about 100 years from now, how bad the situation was. But we have overcome all that. And the COVID is, I think, just a small blip in the economic scene. And we are going to see some real good times in the coming years. So before I just thought of, just briefly giving you an intro into this. So, my speech today or talk today, I have structured it under strictly under 6 to 7 broad headlines. One, of course, is I'll just give you a broad introduction to Africa. Then the economic facets of Africa. The third will be a little bit of time on the India-Africa trade and some observations that I have made, having worked there as a High Commissioner. And also, apart from that, I have also had the opportunity to visit around 6 African countries in official capacity, other than being a High Commissioner. I've been to Uganda, Kenya, Namibia, Botswana, South Africa, and so on. So there are a lot of things that I have seen, and many people also have seen. And I'm sure this small interaction that I have with you, I'll be able to, at least give a different perspective on Africa. Then also, let me spare some minutes on the global outlook to Africa and India's renewed interest in Africa. And if time is still available in our hand, then maybe a little bit on Exim Bank, who has got a great role to play in the African continent in terms of financing, because that's a major thing that is a big constraint for businesses to do business in Africa. So now, let me start with the introduction to Africa. Of course, many of you don't need an introduction to Africa. During our school days and college days, Africa was part of our syllabus. But we had been just, I think it's a touch and go affair with Africa that always we had. Little bit that I think we all tried to know about Africa was Gandhiji's social or political activism in Southern Africa. He spent 21 years in Southern Africa. That is from 1893 to around, I think, 2006. Almost 21 years he spent in Africa and South Africa, and lots of things he himself has written. There are several other articles written about his own experience in Africa. I'm sure many of you must have also read about it. But I think that was one introduction that many of the Indian students during our academic school days and college days knew about Africa. Beyond that, I don't know if you have been a student of geography, maybe a little bit more. But I think that is all we have a rather fair idea of Africa, whatever we have gained during our academic days. But in fact, once you go to Africa, you would realize that Indians have gone to Africa almost 150 years ago, much before we discovered the Gulf, the Middle East, and of course, European continent and the American continent was in the early 20th century. But much before, about 150 years ago, Indians based predominantly from Gujarat had explored and discovered Africa, and they went in small groups. But I'm very happy, at least when I'm traveling in Africa, we have been able to see so much of Indian origin Africans there. And I don't know whether you're all aware, there are 3 million Indian origins in the African continent. 3 million. And out of this 3 million Indian origin Africans in African continent, roughly about 1 million are in South Africa itself. Then they are spread out in Mauritius, Uganda, Tanzania, Kenya, Botswana, Zambia, and so on. Of course, some of them, of course, went when the Britishers took them along to the sugar farms they wanted to set up over there, or to set up the railway lines in Malawi and several other places where they were the colonial masters. So that is how the Indians actually migrated, or forced migration took place. But nevertheless, that was a sad part of Indian history. But the positive part, which I think we should all see, is today there are about 3 million Indian origins in Africa, and all of them are doing extremely well. I think that's one plus point that we also, of course, they all went there as laborers or maybe petty traders and so on. But today, if you are going to see, in comparison to the Native Americans over there, they are far better. They handle much of the business over there. They are invested in hotels. They invested in agriculture. They have invested, nowadays they are setting up new investments in the new areas that are emerging, like the IT sector, plantations, mining sector is another important sector that is coming, because Africa is known for its mineral resources. These are the new areas that these Indian origin Africans are setting up there in Africa. In addition, of course, in bits and pieces, Indian businesses are also looking towards Africa in a big way. Then again, some of those people who are in my age group know Africa from the various amount of assistance that the Indian government had been extending to the African countries in their fight for independence, fight against apartheid, and fight against the colonial masters they had. And in fact, there was a time in the 1970s and early 80s when when they used to gain independence, the Indian Prime Minister or the President or some top VVIP used to be attending those inaugural independent functions. And many of you who are in my generation would recall some the tall African leaders of those days, like of course Nelson Mandela, everybody knows. Then of course there's Robert Mugabe, then Julius Nyerere, Kenneth Kaunda, Julius Nyerere. They were all great tall statesmen of the African continent. Many of their speeches were eloquent speeches on independence and on human rights and so on. During our college days, these were some of those great leaders whom we all heard with great attention, and they spoke on behalf of the developing countries, and the underdeveloped countries at international forums, and their voice was heard by all because they really were very, wise and real statesmen-like leaders. Anyway, the younger generation might not have had the advantage and benefit of listening to these people, but nowadays, with social media, YouTube, and everything, if one is interested, you should, I think, listen to some of these eloquent speeches given by these top leaders from the African continent. Today, Africa is almost free, completely free, I would say. There are 54 countries that comprise of this continent, what we call as Africa. And basically, they all are in what I can say is different stages of development. Now, that is where I come to the second, part of this talk, where the economic facets of Africa is what I try to share with some of you. There are, I think, 2 or 3 small similarities between or with India and Africa. One, I think, is insofar as the population is concerned. India's population is 1.3 billion, and Africa's population is also around 1.3 billion. It's somewhat quite close by. Then comes the GDP. Our GDP is around 2.7 trillion US dollars, and the African continent, the entire African continent put together, I'm talking about here, is also around 2.7 trillion US dollars. So we are almost on the population and the GDP level, we are almost at par. So because these both are at par, the per capita income is also, I think, quite close by. The African national per capita income is around 1,900 to 2,000 US dollars, whereas the Indian per capita, you all must be aware, is hovering around 2,200 to 2,300 US dollars. And I think the most important, I think, similarity, what I would say is, like in India, we all say that Indians are poor, but India is a rich country. Same is the adage I can use for Africa also. Africa is a very rich country. Unfortunately, the Africans are poor. Now, I think these are the 3, I think, broad similarities that between India and Africa that I could draw upon. But, as far as the land area is concerned, India is around 3.2 million square kilometers in area, and Africa is 30 million square kilometers. That's Africa is 10 times the size of India. That's a huge, thing that we all should realize. And I think that is where the whole world is focusing on Africa. Land is a precious commodity now. And the way the population density is there in Africa, it's very sparsely populated. And there is so much of virgin land that is still available in Africa, which the entire world is looking towards for mining activities, for agriculture activities, and whatnot. So that's, I think, a big plus in the African continent, which I think everybody should know. But having worked in Africa and having been there, though land is available as of now, one issue that you all should be aware of is land is also a very sensitive subject in Africa as it is in India. There, at least in India, things have started codifying. The land laws are all well codified, and there are enough rules of inheritance of your land and so on. But unfortunately, Africa is still, I think, in that stage where they are trying to codify the land laws, the leaseholding laws, how to buy a land, how to lease a land, how to do contract farming. So there have been some experiments being done, and it's being done even now. Frankly speaking, there are still real issues on the land there in Africa. Because even now many of these lands are owned by the tribal lords and the chieftains in the remote areas. Like maybe in the capital cities of many of these countries, things are much better. But land is still an issue when it comes to remote areas. So there have been people who have got mining leases running to almost 500,000 acres or hectares of land. They got the license, everything, and when finally they went to that particular land to actually look at that particular piece, they were told this land belongs to a particular chieftain, and now you have to pay the chieftain thousands or millions of dollars before he gives the possession of that land. So there are issues with this, but nevertheless, I think this is an issue everybody should be also aware of, that Africa is 10 times the size of India. 30 million square kilometers. They are much, much bigger than Russia, which I think around 9 million square kilometers. USA is also around 9 million square kilometers. These are the two big continents, or countries that we all know. Compared to that, Africa is a very huge country. Now, when I say Africa is a poor country, I think many of you should not be carried away that everybody is poor. It's not so. I think you all should be aware that Africa has also got very rich countries. When we say India is around per capita around $2,200 to $2,300, the top 4 African countries per capita income, you'll be surprised, is Mauritius per capita income is US $17,000. Then I think, Seychelles. Seychelles per capita income is 17,000 US dollars. Mauritius per capita income is around 11,000 US dollars. Botswana's per capita income is 8,000 US dollars. Gabon is another good country doing very well, 8,500 US dollars. South Africa's per capita income is around 8,000 US dollars. So, that's what I want to say, that when you see the African continent, many people are not aware that there are really very well-off and well-to-do African countries also. The media somehow played a big role in portraying a picture that Africa is a very poor country. No, not at all. In fact, these are, I think, 4 or 5 countries which I mentioned whose per capita income is like any, not a developed country, but then almost a well-developed country. And then you have countries, I think about 25 to 30 countries whose per capita income is in the range of $1,000 to $2,000, and in fact more than $2,000 also. So, roughly I would say 60% of the African countries per capita income is pretty high. And having traveled in Africa, another thing that we all have seen is the kind of poverty that you have, and we all have seen within our own country here in India. You don't find that kind of an abject poverty or malnutrition. Those days were there in Ethiopia, Sudan, Chad, Mali, Burkina Faso. All these kinds of countries, they all went through some very tough times. Even now there are outbreak of famines and civil strife and going on. But the kind of malnutrition that you see sometimes in Indian, rural areas or some other places are, I think, much more severe than what I have seen. Because, what happens is Africa is a land of jungles, you all know. So people definitely have enough of meat and poultry products to eat anyway. They don't suffer from that at all. It's only the grain that is not there because of, some faulty policies, and then natural disasters, famines, locusts, and so on. They have this failure of corn crops, wheat crops, and so on. But as far as the other part, which many people are not aware of, is Africa is a land of jungle. There's no doubt about that, and there is enough of wild animals and other things to feed on. So every small household there, you go to the remote rural areas in African countries. We have all traveled there. Each house has enough of goats, enough of chickens, hens, ducks, all kinds of these poultry products, animals, and other domesticated animals, and they have sufficient supply of protein food. I think this will be, a revelation to many of you, because many of times what happens is we see in these news and TV channels famine and so on, and starving children, malnutrition children, 1 or 2 photographs, and we think the entire Africa is like that. It is not also. So I think this is an important thing which many of you should be aware of. So as of now, I just wanted to broadly cover these, economic facets of Africa, and this would, I think, given you some idea of how things are in Africa. Now the African continent is comprising about 54 countries now. Initially in the 1960s, there were only about 36 countries who had attained independence. So they all realized that they should have one international voice in all international forums. So they set about forming the Organization of the African States, OAS, what you call. And in 1963, around 36 African countries joined together and set up an Organization of the African States, and so that they all can have one kind of a consensus on international issues and speak in one voice. So that went on very well, and then they realized around 2003 that many more new countries have come up. There needs to be a change in the makeup of this OAS, and they all decided to form the African Union. So the headquarters of African Union and the previous OAS is at Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. They continue, and it's a wonderful international organization doing a great service in the African growth story. In fact, they try to build up a consensus on all contentious issues, and they are really doing pretty well. One thing that I thought you all should be aware of or should know is the vision of the African Union. They have set up an agenda called the 2063. This is to coincide with the 50th Golden Jubilee celebration. So when they made this plan, it was in 2013. That's around 7 years ago. That 7 years ago, they made a 50-year plan, which they plan to achieve by 2063. So Agenda 2063 is really, I think, going to be a game changer for Africa. They have set up three big, I think, visionary goals for themselves. And one major goal is to convert the entire Africa into one continental free trade area. We have heard the European Union becoming a free trade thing, but not much about the African continent. But then the African leaders, who are all the visionary leaders, all there, are working towards making Africa into a continental free trade area. In fact, I would say they have already started the process. They have got already small groupings like the SADC, COMESA. These are all, South African Development Corporation. The COMESA is a combination of all Central and Mid Eastern African countries. Then they have got the East African Community, EAC. They are already small groups already existing. The SADC has got about 16 members. They already have a kind of free trade going on within their borders. Their citizens need not take visas to enter each other's country. So all small groups are already there. They have started this process, and I'm sure they don't have to even wait until 2063. In fact, there was a meeting in 2018 in African Union where they said they should integrate much faster. 2063 is too far away, and the world is going to change much by 2063. So they are keen to ensure that Africa becomes a free trade area in the next, I think, 10, 15 years itself. That is, I think, is going to be a big change to the African continent from the trade and international relations point of view. The second thing I think they plan to achieve is to have visa-free travel within Africa, for all Africans. There are 54 countries. Some countries are going through some civil strife and all kinds of things. But their aim and ambition is to have one Africa passport. I think if passport is going to be a difficult thing, they will definitely have a visa-free entry into all African countries. So with that, you have a continental free trade area, where 30 million square kilometers is opened up. Then you have this each number of 1.3 billion people who are now in 54 countries, being able to move, seamless travel within their borders. And another major, I think, decision or plan they have or vision they have is to bring this Africa, which is now a $2.7 trillion economy, to a $29 trillion economy. That's a huge jump. India itself is now a 2.7 or almost 3. We're touching $3 trillion now. And we ourselves are just ambitious, setting up that by 2025 we become a $5 trillion economy. And Africans have gone ahead and they have decided that we should make the entire Africa's GDP to a $29 trillion economy. And I'm sure they are going to achieve that, because the way things are happening now in Africa, I think they made lots of mistakes in initial stages, but now they are soon realizing that whatever capital and resources they had, others are taking it away. So they are, I think, doing the right moves within themselves. And this is going to become a real huge economy in the coming decades. And that is where I think the young graduates and others who are going to come from Ahilya and various other universities need to actually focus on, because they, in fact, frankly speaking, Southeast Asia is much developed than India. Same is the condition with Far East and several other countries. It's only the African continent that is going to give us a scope for businesses. You name it, I think you can do business in almost any sector there, because there is a shortage of everything. I don't think there is what I can say self-sufficiency in any matter, be it food, be it pharmaceutical items, be it industrial goods, be it mining, refineries, commercial vehicles, plantations, you name it, and you definitely need there these things in Africa. So that is the engine of growth for all of us over here. And they are also, of course, making great efforts. And not only when I say they, various other countries are also eyeing towards the same thing. You know, there's only one apple pie that we all are now trying to focus on. And the sooner we realize, we'll be able to, I think, do better. Now, let me also just touch broadly on the India-Africa trade. You know, the Indian-African trade is now touching around $62 billion. I don't know whether many of you realize this. It is $62 billion. The total trade between India and Africa is touching $62 billion. And out of this, India's exports to Africa is only $27 billion. In fact, Africa has got a surplus balance of trade with India. It will be very surprising for all of you. Africa's exports to India is touching $35 billion.